evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of the No Nonsense Naturopath Live. My name is Rochelle Waite, and I am your No Nonsense Naturopath. For those that don't know me, I have a background and special interest in immunology, predominantly autoimmunity, women's health medicine, and reproductive medicine. And it is my goal to show you very simple, no-nonsense techniques and tips that you can incorporate into your life to make a huge advantage for your health without being traumatic.
So tonight we're going to discuss the gut feeling advantage, ways that you can optimize your microbiome for peak performance. So firstly, what I'd love you all to do, if you could grab your phones, I would love you to check in on your favorite social media platform to the No Nonsense Naturopath Live, and maybe take either a screenshot of the page or your office or even your dinner if you're shoveling that down at the minute, and spread the news to your contacts and your friends that you're here and hopefully going to learn some pretty special stuff. So I'd love you to do that. It's my goal to try and really ramp up the numbers coming to these nights. In the next couple of weeks, I've got some fabulous guests coming in, so it's always good to support them. So I'd just like to spread the word, and I'd love you to help me do that. Okay, so let's get on with the show. Oh, if I could only hit the right button. So about maybe more than 3,000 years ago now, there was a man. Hippocrates did say that all disease begins in the gut. Pretty clever guy. And we're only just catching up now to the fact that he was in fact true. All disease does begin in the gut, and we will discuss that further tonight. Because this is a fact, it has to be said that gut health is fundamental to your overall health and obviously a gateway to vitality and the desire to live, really. But our goal should be to really focus on our gut health. And it should be natural to us. It should be something that we intuitively do. And that's what I strive to get across, is very simple things that you can do just to make it happen in the background without you having to try too hard. So the gut has about 100 trillion microorganisms. Now, as far as microbiomes go, the gut microbiome isn't the biggest. We have the skin is a huge microbiome, obviously protects us from invading pathogens from the surface. But our biggest microbiome actually resides in our sinuses, which makes sense because if you say inhale a virus or bacteria or whatever, there's really no other line of defense. Whereas your gut microbiome, if you're eating some dodgy food or something like that, you do have stomach acid as the first line of defense. Having said that, these beautiful 100 trillion resident bacteria, and there are viruses and there are yeasts and there are lots of different microorganisms in the gut, but the bacteria in your gut do so much more than just protect us from invading pathogens. So the gut, 100 trillion residents, 100 trillion new friends that you didn't know you had. The human body has about 37 trillion cells. So the number of gut bacteria far outweigh our own cellular number. So be under no illusion that these guys actually control our body. So by now, most people that come to me have kind of got an idea of gut health anyway, but let's just make it clear. An unhappy gut absolutely leads to autoimmunity. There's no doubt about that these days. Certainly can contribute to weight gain. Absolutely contributes to inflammation and allergies. Absolutely affects our nervous system too. And, you know, an unhappy gut, if the cells of your gut lining are compromised, it's going to lead to things like nutrient deficiencies and vitamin deficiencies and things like that, because you aren't able to absorb or to produce the vitamins that you need. So just very briefly, and we won't be
in particular detail, but what's the gut? So basically it's from your mouth right down to the other end. So your gastrointestinal tract, its goal is, amongst other things, is to break down our food into smaller molecules and nutrients so that we can absorb these things for energy and growth and repair and all those sorts of things. The gut bacteria play a major role in all of this. So when we think about the gut, we actually think about the lining of the gut and the stomach and the intestines. And here we've got the esophagus, the small intestine, and the colon. But it also has to include everything else that's in there. So we're talking about the bacteria, we're talking about the yeast, we're talking about anything that might be floating through at the time. Okay, I would love you to guess for me. And if you're brave and you want to put it in the chat, that would be really, really good. And we'll see how you go. How long is your gut? 15.3 meters? That's pretty long. Or is it as short as 3 meters? Whereabouts in there do you think it lies? Come on, people can have a guess. We've got some guesses here. 10 meters, 35 meters, 6 meters. Okay, well, whoa, didn't mean to do that. I'm glad I didn't give it away. The answer is 8.5 meters in total. So if you have a look, the stomach really doesn't constitute much of that, 30 centimeters. The esophagus is even less. Large intestine is 1.5 meters and the small intestine 6.5 meters. Now, the interesting thing about that is, you know, we've got the lining of the digestive tract and it's got a lot of mucus in it because, you know, even the lining of the stomach has to have a lot of mucus because it's really acidic in there, but even inside our mouth. Now, this mucus allows some things in and not other things, allows, you know, obviously water and nutrients to pass through, but will, you know, try and trap bigger things passing through. It's at this membrane that the absorption of nutrients occurs. Now, what becomes very important to realize is the surface area of the gut is, here it says half the size of an Olympic-sized tennis court. I actually think it's a little bit larger than that, to be honest, but anyway. But in contrast, the lining of your gut is only 1 cell thick. That's a huge contrast. And that has a huge bearing when we go on later on to talk about things like gastrointestinal permeability or leaky gut and how that leads to certain conditions. We need to understand that the gut is more than just the passage between mouth and anus. It's more than just a garbage chute. It has absolutely many, many varied roles, which we will go into, and is very closely associated to the health of almost everything, but particularly your nervous system and your cardiovascular system. And clearly, you know, it's, you know, breaking down the food we eat and absorbing nutrients. But if you don't have a good microbiome and a good gut lining, you're not going to be able to do any of those things. And we need that for things like energy and mood. So let's just have a look here. So the microbiome that we're discussing is predominantly located in the large intestine. So the last sort of portion of your gastrointestinal tract. And as I said, it's a complex ecosystem of bacteria and other microbes. It is not uncommon, particularly these days, to find an overgrowth of bad bacteria. We try to have a balance between good and bad bacteria. And the good bacteria normally constitutes, well, under good circumstances, normally constitutes about 85% compared to 15% of what we term bad bacteria. Now, an overgrowth of the bad bacteria is often known as SIBO, which just stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And, you know, it does cause diarrhea, pain, bloating, but also specifically, you know, nutrient malabsorption is very, very common. The more we can help and support our good bacteria, the less bad bacteria we're going to get. The beauty of our gut microbiome is that if you provide it with everything that it needs, it really does have an amazing ability to regulate itself, pretty much like our own body. Now, the majority of the 100 trillion microbes that we get, and these, you know, microorganisms in the gut or anywhere actually, are called probiotics. We acquire most of these at birth. And just as a bit of an aside, we do see a difference in the microbiomes of people that are born vaginally as opposed to people that are born by cesarean section. And, you know, the medical profession is kind of getting on top of that and doing microbiome transfers and things like that if needed. Now, so as I said, we've got good and bad bacteria. These are some that you know. Bifidobacteria we always hear about, particularly in terms of yogurts and things like that. E. coli, you often associate it with being a bad bacteria. It does have a role in the production of some vitamins and also does help keep bad bacteria in check, but there are some strains that are bad. And so once again, we've got to keep those in balance. We've got lactobacilli, which you'll also know with respect to some dairy products as well. And look, there are lots. You've probably, the bad bacteria down there, you've probably maybe heard of some of those. There are lots and lots and lots of different types. So just one of the roles, and we'll go into some more of the roles, but 80% of your white blood cells, so this is, you know, so we're talking about your immune system, lives in and around your gut and is born around your gut. And this makes sense really when you think about it, because if you are eating something that's going to make you sick, it needs easy access to these immune cells. Some of the other things your gut bacteria does, it has a huge role to play in the promotion of fat storage. So in people that tend towards obesity, we need to look at what their microbiome's doing. If there's abnormal storage of fats, then often the microbiome has a big role to play. Bacteria also good bacteria promote the growth where it's needed of new blood vessels, the training and the development of the immune system, as I said. Our vitamins are produced by our gut bacteria. In large part, the vitamins that we need are not obtained from the food itself, but by the action of the bacteria eating and digesting the fibers in the food to produce the vitamins. So it's not just enough to say, eat your veg, which is a huge part of health, of course, but if you don't have the gut bacteria there to support the conversion into vitamins, and also it's responsible for the breakdown of proteins into amino acids as well, then you're going to still have problems. Gut bacteria has a role to play in the metabolism of a lot of our drugs, our control of our nervous system. And when you think about it, you know, if one example that you might easily recognize is if that you get nervous, you feel it in your gut. And that's the gut-brain axis thing happening. 90% of our neurotransmitters, so the hormones that are released from our brain, 80 to 90% of those are produced by our gut bacteria. For instance, 80% of melatonin is produced by our gut bacteria. 90% of our serotonin, our feel-good hormone, is produced in the gut. Obviously, we've talked about breaking down of food compounds, resistance to bugs. Also, the bacteria send chemical messages to let's say, our gut lining, but also other linings to protect about injury of those actual cell linings themselves. Gut bacteria also have a role to play in bone density. So there really isn't anything that the gut bacteria doesn't have some sort of say in. So I want you to think, particularly from an immune perspective, I want you to think of your gut microbiome like this beautiful English country garden. Now, if we've got any gardeners out there, you will absolutely recognize that if you have a garden full of diversity and you've got the bees fluttering around, bees don't flutter, buzzing around, butterflies flutter, you've got nice rich soils with worms and other microorganisms and flowers everywhere. If there's a lot of diversity, it's going to be a very strong garden. And you can see that it's healthy. Now, if you compare that to, say, an Arizonan, that's not what, a garden from Arizona, there's not much diversity there. And you can see that it doesn't look as healthy. You know, you've got some things that are strong, like the cacti, but you can almost feel and hear the locust plague coming in. Bugs will get in if you don't have enough diversity. And the same goes for our microbiome. We need as much diversity of good gut bacteria as we can in our gastrointestinal system. So, firstly, we need to look at things that are killing our gut bacteria. Because obviously, you know, if under the right circumstances, we're born with a plethora of different gut bacteria that grow as we eat, then we do things like get exposed to stuff. Now, we all know antibiotics kill gut bacteria. Antibiotics, they kill probiotics. That's what they're there for. And they're there to kill the bad bacteria, theoretically. But a lot of the time, they're what are known as broad spectrum antibiotics are prescribed, and they just wipe out everything. Now, interestingly enough, the research suggests that a 5-day course of a broad spectrum antibiotic is enough to knock out your microbiome or affect your microbiome for up to 2 years, unless you actively try and do something about it. That is a huge burden on your body, especially if you're taking more than one lot of antibiotics every 2 years. Sugar also kills gut bacteria. Clearly, it's not too much of a stress to know that all our pesticides, toxins, GMOs, all of those sorts of things have a bearing. Tap water in Australia is not the problem that it is overseas, but I talk to a lot of people globally, so that's in there as well. Having said that, some states are worse than others. Gluten. Now, there are a lot of people that jump on the anti-gluten bandwagon for lots of different reasons. But I will describe to you later one mechanism by which gluten isn't good for our gut. Stress is a huge killer of gut bacteria. Absolutely. And, you know, you also recognize that stress effect on the nervous system, that all has to come from the gut as well. Now, by far, once again, I'd like you to get in the chat and tell me if you can guess, and it's not strictly on this slide here, what, from a global perspective, or let's say a first world perspective, what the biggest killer of gut bacteria is currently. Be brave, put down an answer, and we'll see what we get. Anyone wanting to guess? Maybe. Sugar and stress are absolutely, you know, part of the thing. Yep, Dorothy, sugar and fats. Wow, you would be saddened to learn that the biggest killer at the minute of gut bacteria is the proton pump inhibitors. Have a think about that. They're the Gaviscons, the other types of drugs that your doctors give you for reflux and heartburn. Absolutely. They do give you symptomatic relief from reflux, but they're killing your gut bacteria at very high rates in the background, which makes the situation worse, which means you need more proton pump inhibitors. And you get yourself into a very vicious cycle. Now, there are people these days, because these drugs have been really, quite well prescribed, and of course you can buy them over the counter at the supermarket for the last at least 50, 60 years. People are getting themselves into the situation with long-term use where they wipe out so much of their gut microbiome that you can't recover without a fecal transplant. Now, we're not going to talk about fecal transplants tonight. They are becoming more prevalent, and they're actually very useful if you can get over the fact that it's called a fecal transplant. But that's a discussion for another night. Maybe I'll do that. Okay, so I suggest that if there's anyone here that is on a proton pump inhibitor or a reflux medication, yes, absolutely, you might need it short term because reflux can be absolutely horrible, but you need to address the underlying cause. And that can absolutely be done. So let's see what's coming up next. Leaky gut. Now, leaky gut is probably the cause of the most obvious forms of gastrointestinal discomfort secondary to reflux, I guess. But reflux, people with reflux have leaky gut issues anyway. As I said before, the lining of the gut is only one cell thick. And all of those factors that we discussed can break down the lining of the gut. Now, in particular, one of the really big ones is an overgrowth of yeast. So yeast is in our system, and it acts as a food source for the good gut bacteria. And just for your trivia nights, we all need to sleep between 6 and 8 hours a night, overnight when it's dark, according to our circadian rhythms. Anyone that tells you otherwise doesn't know that that's what you actually need to do. Over that 6 to 8 hour period, your good gut bacteria, assuming they're in good numbers, consume up to 1 kilogram of yeast every night. Just take that in for a minute. And I know this is the case because I see when I saw people face-to-face in my clinic, I had a lot of people that were what I would term serial weighers. So usually women, to be honest, that used to weigh themselves at the same time every morning and sometimes before they went to bed. And they'd say to me, how is it that I can go to bed at one weight and wake up the next morning heavier? And the response would be, did you sleep well last night? Because if you do not give your gut bacteria enough time to digest and eat those yeast particles, they will replicate. And we all know how fast yeast replicates. Just leave a piece of bread on a bench for the day, especially in Queensland. Okay, now the problem with the yeast and leaky gut is that under an electron microscope, yeast have little tentacles, with little hooks in the end of them. And they grab hold of your gastrointestinal lining as they're passing through, and they put little holes in it. And that's what the term leaky gut comes from, because they're actually putting holes. So the holes would be in here, sort of thing, holes in your lining. Now, we do have these junctions in between cells as well. And when we eat things with gluten, gluten causes the body to produce a hormone called zonulin, and zonulin makes these holes and the junctions between the cells expand, allowing all these things that we eat, food particles, predominantly proteins and toxins, to get into where they're not meant to be, into the bloodstream, which causes the immune system to say, hey, hang on, there's something going on here. So that causes inflammation of your GI tract, but it also can lead to things like food intolerances, other allergy and immune system issues, and is a really big predictor of autoimmunity. So we need to watch that. That's why gluten, you know, it's good to minimize it as much as possible without going crazy if you don't want to. There are some states, some autoimmune, anyone that's got autoimmunity or bad food intolerances should cut out gluten, full stop. But if you're not in that scenario, you can probably handle a little bit of it, but we've got to make sure that your good bacterial numbers are up just to kind of counteract the effect. Okay, so the take-home message here is when the microbiome gets ill, we all get ill. Okay? Now, poor microbiome is due to a lack of diversity in our food intake and clearly contributes to poor gut health. So what we need to do is we need to look at the diversity of our foods. Now, with respect to feeding gut bacteria, the gut bacteria eat the fibers in our food, the soluble fibers in our food. So how do we support our microbiome? So within our microbiome, we have all different types. We have lots of different, it's a multicultural sort of community with different ages of bacteria. So if we compare that to everyday life, two things that we need to take hold of here. We know that if we support our community, our local communities, if we support them well and watch out for each other, crime isn't going to be an issue. The bad guys aren't going to get in. And the same thing goes for our microbiome. Similarly, if you think of a multicultural community with different children, different age people, adults, babies, grandparents, our microbiome do not all feed on the same thing. Just like we wouldn't give a steak to an infant or to a 99-year-old man with no teeth, we need to feed our gut bacteria different things. That's where the diversity comes in. And that's where we have a bit of a problem with a lot of gut formulas on the market. Because feeding bacteria soluble fibers is a no-brainer. You provide them and they're going to be eaten by something. But a lot of the gut formulas that are out there only provide maybe one or two different prebiotics. That's what we're using. That's the prebiotic fibers is what we're talking about. You know, it might be slippery elm, it might be inulin, it might be psyllium. And what happens there is they will cause the expansion of good bacteria, but generally only a portion of those bacteria. So what you do is you have an abnormal expansion of some of populations of the good bacteria, but you leave the other good bacteria struggling. So what we need to do is we need to look at supporting the entire community. So to do that, we have to enjoy a variety of whole foods for good gut health. We're talking about fruit and veg here. Now, with respect to probiotics, I'm not going to get into the problems associated with eating too much fruit and the fructose. That's a completely different story. But we need to talk about variety. Now, 2019, which seems a long time ago now, but 2019, University of Sydney released a study that looked at the microbiome of Australia. And what they found is to maintain a minimally or just basically functioning microbiome, so one that works and one that's normal, but not, amazing. To do that, you had to eat between 30 and 40 different fruits and vegetables a week. Let that sink in for a bit. The same study found that 95% of Australians were lucky to get to 12. Now, if you count on your fingers the sorts of things that you eat, 12's about right. Corn, carrot, cucumber, capsicum, you know, wherever you're living, it's a little bit different. But it's very hard to get between 30 and 40 different fruits and vegetables a week. Now, if you also think about what we know about the Mediterranean diet, the traditional Mediterranean diet, not the one that includes McDonald's these days, when you think of the foods that they eat, I'm particularly thinking of a regional Italian community at the moment. They do add lots of different things, the legumes, you know, other sorts of beans and grains and all manner of variety of vegetables to their pasta sauces and their soups and whatever else goes on. We don't tend to do that in Australia as much. And if anyone saw my Facebook post yesterday about the $8.95 cauliflower that was, you know, pretty much going off, it's actually really hard to get, you know, 5 vegetables these days that are of good quality. So this is what we need to kind of incorporate into our life a little bit more. Try and get as much variety. It's not about volume, it's about variety. So that being the case, can we give our body any extra help? These days, it is just really hard. Do we need probiotics? Probiotics are encapsulated bacterial species that you take externally. Now, taking probiotics isn't as easy as you think it is. They do not expand and become populations of bacteria in your gut that are resident. What they do is they function as they are, and they produce the chemicals that they are, and they do the jobs that those probiotics do, but they don't stick in any large proportions. So you get the benefit of having it while you take them, but then when you stop taking them, that benefit ceases. Now, is there a need for probiotics? Sometimes, yes. I mean, if you are, say, in Bali and you've got Bali belly, it may well be a very good idea to take some Saccharomyces boulardii. And, you know, that's specific to usually that sort of gastrointestinal issue. There are lots of different probiotics for lots of different reasons. And if you need to take probiotics, I do recommend that you get some expert advice, because once again, you don't need to be randomly taking probiotics that you don't need. What I would like to say, though, is it's better to consider the root cause of these issues and potentially consider an amazing prebiotic instead. So what I want to do is to show you a quick video, fingers crossed that I can get it to work, on the science of a prebiotic that I recommend to absolutely everyone. Over the course of the last 10 years, I've done a lot of research with respect to how we can best support your microbiome. Obviously, with my autoimmune clients, it becomes extremely important to get on top of that so that we can kind of retrain the immune system not to fight itself. And this is the best by far that I've come up with. This is Dr. Paul Clayton.
I really like Xenobiotic. It seems like a simple product, but it's really elegant. The design behind it is beautiful. It's a blend of a lot of different prebiotic fibers. Now, the prebiotic fibers, what they do is they feed the probiotic species of bacteria that live in your gut. You have some probiotic species inside you, and if you give them what they need, they thrive, they multiply. But you need different prebiotics to do that. Because these fibers, they get into the large bowel, you don't digest them, they pass through the small intestine intact, get into the large bowel, and then they start to be broken down by the probiotic species in a reaction that's basically sort of a fermentation. So what we're doing is we're restoring these compounds back into the diet, restoring a healthy microbiome, and producing gram-positive bacteria, which have a really interesting conversation with the cells that line the gut. Basically, they're producing compounds which say, be healthy.
So, oops, sorry about that. So, Dr. Paul Clayton is an amazing knowledge on everything, to be honest, but particularly this. And he was the one that developed Xenobiotic. And when you speak with him, he says he's done 2 amazing things in his life. He's had his children and he's made Xenobiotic, and he actually thinks Xenobiotic is the better of the 2. But he is an amazing mind, and seriously, I cannot begin to tell you how life-changing that prebiotic support has been for not only myself, but, you know, all of my clients. So that's something that if you don't feel that you can get that dietary diversity that you need at any particular stage in your life, it's something that you should maybe consider. Now, I guess that's about as much as I need to tell you with respect to information tonight. I hope you found that of value. What have I got here? So just letting you know that starting the first week in May, this would be a Monday, I am running a 120-day gut restore program, which takes you not only into the knowledge that we've given you tonight, but some really useful steps to supercharge the restoration of your gut, not just looking at things that you might specifically think gut related, but things that you can also support the rest of your body to do the job properly. The course actually also includes a 4-month supply of Xenobiotic, because you can't restore your gut properly without it. We need to get this happening quickly. I am giving a discount to anyone that signs up from this seminar. Very, very much easy. The discount code is live. If you type that in, you'll get, I think it's a $200 discount. You can get to anything that I have on, any seminars, any courses, anything from my link tree. And that's the easiest way that you can find me. So once again, that's starting on the 6th of May. It would be great to have you there if you are interested. Now, before we go on, I want to know, are there any questions? Oh, trying to get the chat. The chat box isn't, oh, there we go. No questions? I must have done a good job at, I must have done a good job at explaining things. Yeah, does anyone have anything to say, or otherwise you can type in a chat box if you don't want to speak out loud? Okay, let me see. What... excellent. Thank you, Dorothy. No questions. It's always, oh no, what if someone asks something really hard? No, that's all good. If you have any questions, you can go to No Nonsense Naturopath Live Facebook page, and you can ask the questions in there. Okay, so let me go on to tell you about next week. Next week, we have Fuel Your Focus and Future, the science of fats for a sharper mind and healthy body. We have, over the last 70 to 100 years, been brainwashed with the fact that fat's bad. That and the healthy food pyramid that some people still work from are the 2 most dangerous pieces of information we have been given to messaging that we've been given. So we need to look at that and see if we can't do something about it. So I'd love to see you there. I would really love it if you could share that information with your friends, or maybe do a post on tonight's. It will hit YouTube in the coming day or 2. I've got a couple that I need to put up first, but feel free to share that anytime with your friends. As I said, the week after that, I have a special guest. I'd really like to support him and get lots of people in here if we could. It's been wonderful seeing you. Let me just see. No. once again, yeah, great seeing you. Would love to see you here next week. And you can all have a wonderful, healthy, prebiotic filled week.